you doing?
Nothing.
What are you doing?
Nothing.
Hospital janitor saved the dying billionaire CEO's daughter after suspecting that the four has been poisoned. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune as Fred pushed his mop bucket down the pristine corridors of St. Helena's Private Medical Center. 23 years of cleaning these halls had taught him to notice things others missed, a skill that would soon mean the difference between life and death. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I'll be bringing you another story just as powerful and emotional as this one. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. Fred paused outside room 507, the VIP suite that had been buzzing with activity for the past 3 days. Through the partially open door, he could see her. Sophia Blackwood, the 17-year-old daughter of tech billionaire Richard Blackwood. She lay motionless, her face pale against the Egyptian cotton pillowcases, surrounded by the most advanced medical equipment money could buy. The doctors were baffled. What had started as a routine appendectomy had spiraled into a medical mystery. Despite removing the infected appendix successfully, Sophia's condition continued to deteriorate. Her vital signs fluctuated wildly, her body seemed to be rejecting every treatment, and the best specialists in the country couldn't explain why. Fred had seen many patients during his years at St. Helena's, but something about this case nagged at him. Maybe it was the way the medical staff whispered in hushed tones, or how security had been tripled on this floor, or perhaps it was simply his instinct, the same instinct that had saved him during his days as a combat medic in Afghanistan before life had brought him to these humbler circumstances. As he cleaned the hallway outside her room, Fred observed the parade of medical professionals coming and going. Dr. Harrison, the chief of medicine, looked more haggard with each passing hour. Nurses changed shifts with worried glances. And through it all, Richard Blackwood paced the family waiting area like a caged lion, his usual commanding presence reduced to that of a desperate father. What would you do if you noticed something the experts missed? Would you speak up, even if no one would likely listen to you? It was during the evening shift change when Fred first noticed the anomaly. As he emptied the waste bins in the medication preparation room, he observed Nurse Patricia Williams preparing Sophia's 4-bag. Patricia had been with the hospital for 5 years, always professional, always precise. But tonight something was different. Her hands trembled slightly as she inserted the additives into the saline solution. When she noticed Fred watching, she quickly turned away, her face flushing. Fred had seen that look before, in the eyes of soldiers who knew they were doing something wrong but felt they had no choice. He continued his work, but his mind raced. Over the next 2 hours, he paid closer attention to the routines around Sophia's care. Most of the staff followed standard protocols, but Patricia's behavior remained odd. She would linger near Sophia's room even when not assigned to her, and twice Fred caught her checking her phone with an expression of barely concealed anxiety. The breakthrough came when Fred was cleaning the nurse's station. A notification popped up on Patricia's computer screen. She had forgotten to lock it. The message was brief but chilling. Increase the dose tonight. Make it look natural. Your son's medical bills will be paid as promised. Fred's blood ran cold. His mind immediately went to the 4-bag Patricia had prepared earlier. Without hesitation, he abandoned his cleaning cart and headed straight for room 507. As he approached, he could hear the steady beep of monitors and the soft whoosh of the ventilator. Patricia was inside, adjusting the 4 drip rate. "Evening, Patricia," Fred said casually, entering with his mop. "Just need to clean up a spill in here." Patricia startled, nearly dropping the 4 adjustment dial. "There's no spill in here, Fred. You need to leave. This is a sterile environment." "My mistake," Fred replied, but he didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the 4-bag. Years of medical training, dormant but not forgotten, kicked in. The solution looked slightly cloudier than it should, and there was a faint precipitate at the bottom of the bag. Signs of incompatible medications or contamination. "Patricia,"
What are you
he
doing?
said quietly. "What did you put
Nothing.
in that bag?" Her face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about. Get out before I call security." But Fred had seen enough. He reached for the emergency call button, pressing it 3 times, the code for immediate medical emergency. Within seconds, the room filled with medical staff. "What's going on here?" Dr. Harrison demanded, looking between the janitor and the nurse. Fred stood his ground. "The 4 needs to be tested immediately. I have reason to believe it's been tampered with." The room erupted in confusion. Patricia tried to leave, but security, already on high alert, blocked her exit. Dr. Harrison, to his credit, didn't dismiss Fred immediately. Perhaps it was desperation, or perhaps he recognized something in Fred's eyes, the look of someone who had seen death and knew its signs. "Stop the 4 drip," Dr. Harrison ordered. "Get a new line in, use fresh everything, and send this bag to the lab stat." The next hour was chaos. Lab results came back showing lethal levels of potassium chloride in the 4 solution, enough to cause cardiac arrest within hours. It would have looked like a natural complication from her surgery. Another tragic case of post-operative complications. Patricia broke down in tears, confessing everything through her sobs. The story that emerged was both heartbreaking and infuriating. Patricia's 8-year-old son had been diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia 6 months ago. The experimental treatment he needed wasn't covered by insurance, and the costs were astronomical. Desperate and drowning in debt, she had been approached by someone claiming to represent a concerned party who would pay for her son's treatment in exchange for a simple favor: ensuring that Sophia Blackwood didn't survive her hospital stay. Richard Blackwood, who had been called to the scene, listened to the confession with a mixture of rage and surprisingly understanding. As a father himself, he could comprehend the lengths one might go to save their child, even as he grappled with the fact that this woman had nearly killed his daughter. But the investigation was far from over. Patricia didn't know the identity of her contact. All communication had been through encrypted messages and cryptocurrency payments. Someone wanted Sophia dead, and they were still out there. If you discovered someone was being poisoned but stopping it meant destroying another person's life, what would you choose? As the police took Patricia away and the medical team worked to flush Sophia's system of the poison, Fred found himself in an unusual position. Richard Blackwood himself sought him out in the hospital cafeteria where Fred was taking his break. 23 years you've worked here, Richard said, sitting across from him with 2 cups of coffee. 23 years of being invisible to people like me. Fred shrugged. I'm used to it. Most people don't see the cleaning staff. That was almost my daughter's death sentence, Richard admitted. If you hadn't noticed. How did you know? Fred was quiet for a moment, then rolled up his sleeve, revealing old shrapnel scars. Combat medic, 82nd Airborne. Afghanistan, 2001. I've seen what desperation does to people, and I've seen what poison does to bodies. When you've watched enough people die, you learn to recognize the signs. Why are you mopping floors? Richard asked bluntly. With your background, PTSD, Fred answered simply. Came back broken. Lost my medical license after an incident. Took me years to get stable enough to hold any job. St. Helena's gave me a chance when no one else would. The work is honest, the pay is enough, and I can still help people, just in a different way. Richard was silent, processing this information. Then he asked, the person who wanted my daughter dead, they're still out there. The police are investigating, but I need someone who sees what others miss. Someone who understands both medicine and human nature. Would you help me? Fred looked at the billionaire, one of the most powerful men in the country, asking a janitor for help. "I'm not a detective, Mr. Blackwood." "No," Richard agreed. "But you're observant, you have medical knowledge, and most importantly, you're invisible to the kind of people who might be involved in this. I'll pay you." "I don't want your money," Fred interrupted. "But I'll help. Someone tried to murder a 17-year-old girl in my hospital. That doesn't sit right with me." Over the next few days, as Sophia slowly recovered from her near-death experience, Fred continued his janitorial duties while quietly investigating. He had advantages that professional investigators lacked: access to areas without suspicion, the ability to overhear conversations that stopped when important people approached, and a network of fellow service workers who saw everything but were rarely seen themselves. The first clue came from Rosario, who worked in the hospital laundry. She mentioned overhearing two doctors discussing Blackwood Industries' upcoming merger with Titan Pharmaceuticals, a deal that would create one of the largest medical technology companies in the world. The merger was controversial, with several board members opposing it. Fred dug deeper, spending his breaks in the hospital's public computer lab, researching Blackwood Industries. What he found was a complex web of corporate politics. Richard Blackwood had been pushing for the merger against significant opposition, particularly from his own brother, Thomas Blackwood, who served as CFO. If something happened to Richard's only heir, control of his shares would revert to a family trust controlled by Thomas. But corporate greed seemed too simple a motive. Fred had learned in war that the most dangerous enemies were often the ones hiding in plain sight, wearing friendly faces. He began paying closer attention to the people around Sophia's recovery room. Her medical team had been carefully vetted, security was tight, but there were still regular visitors. Family friends, business associates paying their respects, and of course, family members. It was during one of these visits that Fred noticed something odd. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Blackwood Industries' chief medical officer and a family friend, always brought fresh flowers for Sophia's room. Beautiful arrangements that she insisted on placing herself, adjusting them just so on the bedside table. Most people would see a caring gesture. Fred saw something else: the way she positioned the vases, always ensuring they were within Sophia's breathing space, and how she chose flowers with particularly strong scents. Fred researched the flowers Dr. Walsh brought: lilies, jasmine, and tuberose. All beautiful, all fragrant, and all known to potentially trigger respiratory issues in sensitive individuals. For a patient recovering from systemic poisoning, whose immune system was compromised, it could slow recovery or mask other symptoms. He shared his suspicions with Richard, who was skeptical. "Jennifer has been with our family for 15 years. She's Sophia's godmother, for Christ's sake." "Sometimes the greatest betrayals come from those we trust most," Fred replied. "Let me ask you something. Who benefits most if the merger fails?" Richard's face darkened as he considered the implications. Jennifer's husband runs Apex Medical, one of Titan's main competitors. If our merger fails, Apex would be in position to acquire Titan instead, Fred finished. "With your daughter gone and you devastated by grief, would you still push for the merger?" The trap was set carefully. Richard announced that Sophia would be moved to a regular room the next day, her condition finally stable. Security would be reduced to normal levels. Dr. Walsh immediately volunteered to oversee the transition, insisting it was her duty as both the company's medical officer and Sophia's godmother. That night, Fred positioned himself in a supply closet with a clear view of the hallway. Richard had wanted to involve the police, but they needed proof. Attempted murder was one thing, but proving conspiracy required catching someone in the act. At 2:47 a.m., Dr. Walsh appeared. She moved confidently through the corridors, her hospital credentials giving her unrestricted access. Fred followed at a distance, watching as she entered Sophia's room. Through the observation window, He saw her approach the sleeping girl with a syringe. Fred burst in just as she was reaching for the 4-port. Dr. Walsh stepped away from the patient. She spun around, the syringe still in her hand. "Fred, what are you doing here?" "I'm administering her prescribed medication." "At 3 a.m.? Without a nurse present?" "That's not protocol, doctor." Her face hardened, the mask of concern dropping away. "You're a janitor. You have no idea what you're talking about." "Former combat medic," Fred corrected. "And I know enough to recognize when someone's about to inject air into an 4-line. Embolism, quick, efficient, and it would look like a post-operative complication." Security rushed in, followed by Richard and the police who had been waiting nearby. Dr. Walsh's facade crumbled entirely. The syringe fell from her hand as she sank into a chair. "You don't understand," she said, looking at Richard with tears in her eyes. "The merger will destroy everything. Apex Medical has been developing affordable insulin alternatives. If Titan absorbs the market, millions of diabetics will suffer." "I wasn't. I didn't want to hurt Sophia. I just wanted to delay things to make you reconsider." "By killing my daughter?" Richard's voice was ice. "The first attempt wasn't supposed to be lethal," Walsh confessed. "Just enough to make her sick to buy time. But when that failed, they said it had to be decisive. My husband. Apex is everything to him. He said if I didn't help, he'd leave me, take our children. I've been living in hell for months. When someone we trust betrays us for what they believe is a greater good, can we ever truly understand their choice, even if we can't forgive it?" As Dr. Walsh was led away in handcuffs, Fred stood by the window watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and amber. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him exhausted but oddly at peace. He had saved a life, not with scalpel or medication, but with observation and instinct. Richard found him there. "She's awake. Sophia wants to meet the man who saved her life." Fred hesitated. "I'm just the janitor, Mr. Blackwood." "No," Richard said firmly. "You're the hero who saw what everyone else missed. Come on." Sophia Blackwood was sitting up in bed, still pale but with bright, alert eyes. When Fred entered, she smiled. "So you're my guardian angel. Dad told me everything." "Just doing my job, miss," Fred said, uncomfortable with the attention. "Your job is to clean floors," Sophia pointed out with a teenager's directness. This was something more. Over the next hour, Fred found himself telling his story. His time in Afghanistan, the incident that led to losing his medical license, a PTSD episode during surgery, his struggle to rebuild his life. Sophia listened with the intensity of someone who had just faced death and found every detail of life fascinating. "You know," Richard said as the conversation wound down, "Blackwood Industries has been looking to expand our medical division's security protocols. We need someone who understands both medicine and human nature, someone who can see the threats others miss. The position comes with full benefits, including mental health support." Fred looked at the father and daughter. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of responsibility again." "Think about it," Sophia said. "You saved my life by being exactly who you are, observant, caring, and brave enough to act when it mattered. Maybe it's time to stop hiding behind that mop." As Fred left the hospital that morning, his shift over, he reflected on the strange turns life could take. He had spent years believing his useful days were behind him, that his skills and instincts were relics of a past better forgotten. But perhaps Sophia was right. Perhaps saving lives didn't always require a medical degree or a soldier's uniform. Sometimes it just required paying attention and having the courage to act. The investigation continued over the following weeks. Dr. Walsh's confession led to the arrest of her husband and several Apex Medical Board members who had orchestrated the conspiracy. The merger between Blackwood Industries and Titan Pharmaceuticals proceeded, but with new provisions ensuring affordable medication access, a compromise Richard insisted on after learning the lengths people would go to prevent it. Patricia Williams, the nurse who had poisoned the four, was sentenced to prison but received a lighter sentence due to her cooperation and circumstances. Richard Blackwood, in a gesture that surprised many, established a fund for her son's cancer treatment. No parent should face that choice, he said when asked about it. As for Fred, he eventually accepted Richard's offer, becoming Blackwood Industries' first chief of medical security. His unique perspective, combining medical knowledge, military experience, and years of invisible observation, proved invaluable in protecting both the company's assets and its people. But he never forgot his roots. Every Friday afternoon, Fred could be found in St. Helena's cafeteria, having coffee with the janitorial staff, listening to their observations, and reminding himself that heroes come in all forms, sometimes wearing expensive suits, sometimes wearing scrubs, and sometimes pushing a mop bucket down a quiet corridor, seeing what others miss. Sophia Blackwood made a full recovery and went on to study medicine herself, inspired by the man who saved her life. At her medical school graduation, she dedicated her degree to Fred, who taught me that healing isn't just about medicine. It's about seeing people, really seeing them, and having the courage to act when it matters most. In his speech at the ceremony, Fred reflected on the night that changed everything. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out.